Hey folks, it's Pastor Jared here coming to you with this week's Teaching Tuesday. Every Tuesday during the lunch hour, I upload these short 10 to 15 minute videos that will hopefully give you something to think about or to chew on, or maybe you'll even learn something about the Christian faith. I hope that you're doing well this week and that your week is off to a good start. Last week, we kicked off a theme for our next several Teaching Tuesdays on the Lord's Prayer. So every week here at Ridge, during worship, the close of the pastoral prayer, we all join in praying the prayer that Jesus taught us to pray. We call it the Lord's Prayer. And in it, we start with the words that are up here on the top of the screen. Our Father, who art in heaven. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about those first two words, Our Father, go back in our video feeds, either on our YouTube page or here on our Facebook, and check that video out. Today, I want to talk more about the line, Who art in heaven. You know, some of this stuff we say so frequently, or it's just part of our church or even cultural vernacular that we might take it for granted. So let's slow this down and unpack it in a few ways that might teach us something about this God, the God revealed in the Bible, and might even, encourage us to do something different this week. I wanted to close with kind of a challenging word or a chance for us to lean into this line of our prayer, Who art in heaven. So let's start with that line. In the very beginning of the Bible, in Genesis chapter 1, the Bible opens with a line that we're probably all famous with. In the beginning, the Bible starts out, an appropriate line, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, when we read the book of Genesis and many of the earliest books of the Bible in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, they are operating with a particular understanding of the heavens and the earth. And that's where this little handy-dandy drawing comes in. It's an ancient understanding of the ways in which the world was created. So God created the heavens and the earth, but the way they looked at that was, earth is the place that you and I live on. We understand that part. The heavens are all of the heavenly, planets and stars, the creation that is in the sky, the heavens. You know, a lot of times cartoons will depict God sitting on top of a cloud, or even some of the artwork and drawings, or the heavens are on top of clouds with a golden gate, and that proverbial Peter who stands in front of it, leading people in or saying, no, you're going to the other place. Well, the other place for them, the underworld, or Sheol, to use one of the words that we find in Scripture, was a creation or a part just below the earth in its own little place, below the earth. So the heavens are above, hell or Hades or underworld or Sheol was below. But that is not the entire picture. We really get a glimpse into this early on in the book of Genesis when the flood comes about. So when they looked at the heavens and the earth, they understood that the earth and the underworld were all kind of connected, and they were the foundations of the earth. Maybe that line triggers a bell because we hear Psalms and things like that God even shakes the foundations of the earth, or that the earth is God's footstool. I mean, there's a whole lot of images that are lines in Scripture that use this language and operate under this understanding. So the earth is where we live, the heavens are the skies, the stars, the planets. Sheol is below us, and there's foundations of the earth. But there are also foundations of the heavens. There's a heavenly firmament, kind of like a ceiling or a bubble that encapsulates the heavens and the earth. There's actually a realm beyond it. Now, this is where we get the accounts of the flood. So if you go back and read, I think it's in Genesis chapter 8, somewhere right around there, we hear how God opened the floodgates of heaven, and that is when water seemingly just poured from the heavens, the firmament that protected this created order from the waters of the firmament above were opened up, and that's when the earth became flooded. That's how the story goes. This spot, though, is where God dwells. So there's another passage in Isaiah that talks about how the Lord was high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Well, where this God who art in heaven dwelled was above the heavens and the earth, above the firmament, above the waters of the firmament, in a heavenly temple. Now, I'm going to just put that up here. This is where God was understood to live and to dwell. When Isaiah in chapter 6 has this vision of seeing the Lord high and lifted up with the seraphim surrounding God, covering their faces, covering their feet, and they were flying with these 6 pairs of wings. They were calling to one another, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord. The whole earth is full of his glory." When the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, talks about the God who art in heaven, they're understanding that this God dwells in a place entirely different and above and beyond the order that God created, the world, the heavens and the earth that God created. Again, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. Now, in this temple where God dwells, there is a proverbial throne that Isaiah sees. One of the things that this prayer reminds me of is that God is in heaven and that God is on the throne, in control, even when the world seems out of control, right? A good word, especially continuing to happen today. But implicit within that is that God is on the throne and I'm not. Boy, there are a lot of times when I am tempted to put myself on that throne. The throne of judgment, the throne of, and I mean judgment in the bad way, not in like the ways that we should, that Jesus teaches us to do in Matthew chapter 7. But in the place where like I become condescending and judgmental, kind of like a Pharisee, and like, oh God, thank you for not making me like that person. As the story when Jesus is like, there's this tax collector, a sinner, is like, God have mercy on me. And Jesus is like, that guy is a whole lot closer to heaven than the Pharisee or the religious leader, the preacher, the pastor, who's saying, God, thank you, I'm not like the rest of these idiots. Basically, that's the Jared Kendall version, translation. But when I pray, God, our Father who art in heaven, it's like God's in heaven, God's on the throne, not Jared. So I have to humble myself. I have to say, I don't have this all figured out. I think I know who God is. I've spent a lot of time learning and studying this stuff and reading the scriptures and praying, but like I don't have God in a box and figured out. God's in heaven. God's above everything I see and understand and know. And yet, here is the third part about this prayer that Jesus teaches us to pray. Our God, who art in heaven, above it all, in control, holding it all in place, on the throne, God, not us, we know that this God is not only away or apart from us. We're just coming out of the Christmas season, the time, like, irrevocably when we know that God moved into our neighborhood, like the Message translation puts it, and dwells among us. This God is not content to be far and apart. This is not like the Greek gods who are like, I just got done watching a couple weeks ago the new Wonder Woman movie, and it talks about the fighting that the gods do and all that. No, that's not the God revealed in scriptures. That's not the God revealed in Jesus. Now, this is the God who gets off the throne and comes to be among us so that we might come to be with God. That's where this watch or this clock comes into play. There was a man, maybe you've heard of him, Sir Isaac Newton, the apple on the tree and gravity and all that. Well, he also would talk about God from time to time, and he says like the regular motion of the planets. He loves studying the planets. He loves studying the world. I mean, we talked, on Sunday, the Wesleyan Quadrilateral, how like God gifts us with reason, like science and faith are not at odds with one another, like they're conversation partners, revealing to us the truth and the wisdom and the goodness of God in the world. So Newton's looking around at the planets and he says their regular motion makes it reasonable to believe in the continued existence of God. He goes on to say that God is like a watchmaker, or like a watchmaker. God was forced to intervene in the universe and tinker with the mechanism from time to time to ensure that it continued operating in good working order. This isn't the God who just sets it and forgets it. Remember that old commercial with that some cooking device? You set it, you forget it. Now, God pays attention and makes sure that when things get out of tune, that God's working to set them back in place again. That's true of this world, and that's true of your lives, of my life. Even when it seems like, God, where are you? What are you doing? Are you doing anything? Is there even a God? I mean, there are times that we find ourselves in today that really can make us question, rightfully so. What's this all about? And that's good. Lean into the questions. Lean into those. But we believe that the scriptures reveal to us a God who does not just set it and forget it, but rather, like a watchmaker, gets involved and makes sure that things start working again. It's the God who's on the throne. It's the God who's high and lifted up, who's with us. It's the God who art in heaven. Okay, so let me just close with today with something this has got me thinking about. You know, I think about watchmakers, clockmakers, like the incredible detail that they must use and that they do to make sure that things are running properly. I think about woodworkers, so I'm a hobbyist woodworker, and like their attention to detail and the love with which they work. The love that they put into the details, the minutia, the things that nobody else sees except for them and maybe a couple other like clockmakers or woodworkers or whatever the hobby is. You can think of it within your own realm of interest. But this God loves the details. I had a professor in college, Professor Horst, who used to say that God is so promiscuous. Such an interesting word. It stuck with me for so many years later. But this is a God who could have just settled with a 7-color box of crayons. But instead, this God, this promiscuous God, this God who loves the details, the minutia, this God whose goodness overflows, smothered this world, graced this world with color and life. We were talking in staff meeting earlier today, taste and see that the Lord is good. So here's my thinking as we appropriate that to the prayer, who art in heaven, the line, who art in heaven. What details might you notice today? I want to invite you into the details, of your life, of your rhythms. The sun's out, happens to be out today, or we still have some snow on the ground here in the greater Munster area. Be paying attention to the details. My daughter's been learning about snow and about crystals, and in order to see this snowflake as a crystal, you have to use a microscope or hold one in your hand and stare at the detail. May you notice details of the good, loving God who created the world, who art in heaven, and who continues to be involved in gracing and blessing the details of your life. It's this God, our Father, who art in heaven, that we'll talk about next week when Jesus teaches us to pray, "Hallowed be thy name."